Cha. Hey there. Hello, how do you do? My name is Harry Wetzel. Thanks for coming. It's the 80s, darling. Yes, it is. It's the last day of August 1983. And I came to the bookstore with my suitcase and my book bag because I left my apartment for the last and final time, and I came to go to work to make money because I thought that was a better idea to go to work and make money than to spend the day looking for an apartment. Right. So I was at the bookstore all day long. Got wrapped up in the workaday business of shelving and reshelving, plenty of new books coming in every day, especially in the computer section. It was a booming industry, the computer book industry, and there was books coming in every day. So I spent the whole day hard at work, and when the end of the shift came, it occurred to me that I had not made any plans. I had not made any plans at all for that night's lodgings. Brilliant. So I picked up my suitcase and I picked up my book bag and I walked out of the break room, walked past the help desk where luminous Amber sat, and I started walking up the stairs to the main floor of the bookstore, and Amber said, "Good luck." I said, "Thank you." And I walked up the stairs and out the front doors of the bookstore into the living city of dreadful night. And there I was, holding my suitcase and my book bag, looking rather like a lost tourist, I think. And so I went over to a phone booth. It wasn't a phone booth. It was a pay phone. We didn't have booths anymore. We were already done with those. How many of you remember pay phones or phone booths even? When was the last time anybody got inside a booth and used a phone? Yeah. Comment on that. What's your experience the last time you used a bloody payphone, for crying out loud? I know. So anyhow, I went over to the payphone and I got out my book with my numbers. You either had them memorized or you had them written down. So I called Suzanne, which was memorized, and people were always changing their numbers, and not everybody had a number. You had to have it. It was every line, every phone was a landline then. Yes. So I called. I had a number for Carp. I had a number for Weasel. Was a funny number, and I called him, and he answered the phone. And This was not his own phone. This was Randy and Linda's phone number, and he's over at Randy and Linda's, and they live out in Queens in a completely different neighborhood from Astoria, Queens. And he was staying on Randy and Linda's couch, and he said, "Listen, I've got a date tonight." Weasel said this. He says, "I got a date tonight, and I plan to spend the night over there. So why don't you come and take my place on Randy and Linda's couch?" And I'm like, "Where's Randy and Linda? What do they say to this?" He said, "They'll be fine. Just get over here, and you can take my place on the couch. It'll be perfectly all right." So I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "Okay." And he gave me directions on how to get out there to Randy and Linda's place. And we hung up the phone. And I went and got on the subway and I went out to Randy and Linda's, a different subway line than I had ever taken. It was the number E or something weird like that. I know. And so then you're in a whole different neighborhood of Queens from Astoria, Queens. And I walk over to Randy and Linda's apartment there, and they live in an apartment building. And I go up to the second or third floor where they live, knock, knock, knock on the door, and there's Weasel, who answers the door. And he's like, "All right, come on in. There's the TV, there's the sofa, there's the refrigerator. Don't break anything. I'm gonna take off. It's perfect timing. I gotta get going." And I'm like, but he says it'll be fine when he gets home. When they get home, Randy and Linda will be delighted to see you. It'll be perfectly fine. I'll see you tomorrow or the next day or whenever. And I'm like, "Well, thank you for giving me your space on the sofa." And he says, "No problem at all." And poof, he was gone. All right. So Randy and Linda have a couple of ferrets, a couple of weasels, literal weasels. I know, a couple of ferrets. Let's call them ferrets just for the sake of clarity. Yeah, Puck and Cobweb. Oh, they were so cute. Right. So Puck and Cobweb were running around, and I'm sitting there in Randy and Linda's living room on the sofa, and I turn on the television, and I just sit there, afraid to touch too much. I don't want to make any trouble. And eventually, home comes Randy, and he's like, "Harry, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm taking Weasel's place on the sofa. He said he had a date, and he said I could take his place. We both hope it's okay." He's like, "Sure, it's okay. What the?" And so I stayed at Randy and Linda's place for a couple of nights. They were very, very kind, very lovely. Detroiters too, so we know each other from, we have old school ties and everything. And I'll never forget seeing the two of them as the leads in The Robber Bridegroom back in Detroit at the Attic Theater. Fantastically talented, lovely people. So I was staying there at their place for a couple of nights, and I'm like, I'm remembering what Benjamin Franklin said about house guests. He said, "House guests are like fish. Both start to smell after 3 days." So I don't like to stay beyond the 3 day, you know, benchmark. You know what I mean? That way your welcome is not worn out. So I said, I'm going to go. I'm going to start asking around, calling around. Well, remember there was that attic where all my furniture was being stored above my apartment? Yes. Well, I went over to there, checked it out, went all the way up the stairs to the garret attic, which didn't actually have a lock. All my stuff was in that room without a lock. Oh, well. But I went in there, and remember, I told you there was a big, comfy brass bed already laid out, so my bed was stacked up against the wall, and all the other furniture, everything that I owned was there. But I could stay on that brass bed. There was no electricity, there was no plumbing. I had to use the facilities, you know what I mean, at the local bar, if I needed to go. And so I stayed there as a squatter in the attic for several nights. It was actually quite pleasant, and I wasn't pestering anybody by staying on their sofa. Hey, I know I wasn't a pester. People are very kind. But this way, I could just exist. Hey, I still had friends. We still went out to, it wasn't like I was suddenly completely broke or anything like that. I suddenly had a job. I was gainfully employed at the bookstore. Yes. So I'd go out boozing it up with Carp or boozing it up with Weasel or something like that. And at the end of the night, I'd take off and go back to my little garret squatting room. Yes. Well, that went on for some time. And I'm getting together with Suzanne, and she's living at that cute little apartment up there, the cute little apartment where Lily lived initially. Then the two of them lived. Then Lily moved out. And Suzanne is there alone. And we're up there sitting around smoking dope, and we're watching The Honeymooners one night. She says, why don't you just stay here for a while? It's a little bit weird that you're doing this squatting thing over in the attic over there. and there's no electricity and there's no plumbing. That's a drag. Why don't you just stay here? It's not going to be very long. You can find a place. I've got that." And she said it was so beautiful of her to offer this because it wasn't that big a room. So, when it was her and Lily, uh, 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 they had an extra foam mattress. So you'd lay the foam mattress on the floor, and that's where I stayed. I wound up staying at Suzanne's. Now I'm back on Manhattan instead of staying out in Astoria, Queens. Have to take the train, take a long walk into a place with no electricity. I know. I'd go into the no parking bar and use the facilities. You know, get a drink, which was counter to your, but that way I could at least void. Yes. Sorry to go into that little detail, but anyhow, so that was me living in 100th Street. And I'll tell you what happened next later on. Yes.